I think we only have 2 more of these after this. And so I wanted today to do something a little bit more workshop-y rather than just kind of like me lecturing at you. I wanted to try to leave you all with something that you could really kind of start on. And I know that you're all in sort of various places within this process, right, of like language access planning. But I found a really great template to build upon from a place called Casa de Esperanza. And I'm going to share the file in the chat now. And it's actually a Word document. So we can work on it together. And my idea was that we've had a lot of success before when we've sort of used each other as resources and talked with each other and shared progress updates. And so what I would really love for you all to do would be to download this guide. It's just a template for a very simple language access plan, but it's a place to start for those of you who have not yet started. And it's a place to think about what you've got, maybe from a different perspective, maybe to refine it for those of you who are a little bit further along in the process. And so I'd like to be fairly interactive with this and kind of go through it together and use each other as resources. And so why don't you go ahead and if you have not already, please download the Word document from the chat box and open it up and we will start working on it together. Okay. Before we jump in, does anybody have any questions or anything that they want to discuss or bring up? Or one thing I wanted to ask you all today is as we plan out the next 2 sessions, the last session is going to be kind of like not a Q&A exactly, but sort of just like a recap of everything we've learned in the last year and a half and a chance for us to talk about some of it. And so really, I'd love if you all could put in the chat box or say out loud anything that you'd like to see covered in the next 2 sessions, like any pressing questions that you have that have not already been covered, or any special information you'd like me to try to find for you. And I am analog writing down your answers. So please go ahead and speak now or forever hold your peace. I have some interesting ideas, and I think the last session will be really beneficial as a recap. I may end up doing a recap for the final 2. I would love your feedback on that. And if you think of something, even just in the next 45 minutes while we're together, you can feel free to enter it in the chat anytime. But if in the meantime, if nobody has any input there, let's go ahead and take a look at this sample language access plan. And I would love for you to spend some time answering these questions, right? And a lot of them are going to seem really basic for those of you who have already been far down the line with language accessibility, but it's a really good exercise to go back to square one and think about these things over again anyway, because ultimately these are the questions you're going to have to answer over and over again as you constantly reevaluate what you're doing and you constantly reevaluate your plan. So let's, start with the basics. Connection to your mission, right? What I like about this worksheet is that it's an actual template, right? So it says literally, insert your organization's mission here. Now, I know a lot of you are government, and so it doesn't have to be like a formal mission statement, kind of like a nonprofit's would be. Here you can just say some of those goals we talked about before when we talked about evaluation and assessment and setting really clear goals so that you can actually make them achievable and meet them. So this would be a great place to put your goals or your mission. So why don't you go ahead and just take a few minutes to do that now. Okay, and the next thing to do here would be to go to item B and list out the languages that you've identified. Now, my hope would be that by this point in our language access programming, you will have identified at least the top 5 languages in your area, right? So this is kind of a review. What are the top 5 languages in your areas? Is anybody willing to share?
Yes, I can share.
Great, thank you, Vin.
Uh, in our area, in Greater Akron area over here, I would say, I say Greater Akron, it will include from the Star County down towards the Canton and near to the Cleveland and towards the Youngstown area. So mostly Spanish is the first um, language which is mostly needed in this area. In second, mostly in the Akron area, due to the refugee population, Nepali sometimes come. A lot of our customers say Nepali come the second.
So we've got
Uh,
Spanish, Nepali. What are the other 3?
Other 3 will be Arabic is the other one, and some of the other new language from Afghanistan. Then language from other will be French, I would say, because a lot of people who is from this Congo also speak French. So
great. So yeah, so that's a great list. Have all of you been able to identify the top 5 languages in your areas throughout the programming that we've been doing in the last, while? It's one of those things again where it's you think a lot of it in the back of your mind, right? You know your communities better than everybody else or anybody else. But if you're going to get a functional policy through, you really want to define that and write down the languages that are needed in your area, right? So if anybody has not yet done that, I would encourage you really to make it a priority to go ahead and make sure that you have an understanding of what your top 5 languages are or what your threshold languages are. And for those of you who maybe have not been here before, threshold languages would be languages that meet a criteria for whether or not your city or organization will, under law or under policy, provide language assisted services automatically. And so you're going to want to go ahead and write those things down. For those of you who are just joining us now, if you go into the chat box, there's a Word document called Casa de Esperanza Language Access Plan Template. This is from a really great organization called Casa de Esperanza, and we're going to kind of work on it together. We're not going to get through the whole thing. So maybe we'll skip some of the stuff that you guys are already experts in by now. Definitions, for example. But I want you to look down in particular on page 4, if you guys can. And I think that the table that's nested in here, the point of contact worksheet, is a really valuable tool. And I would love to have you all fill it out to the best of your abilities as a way to start thinking about how to functionally expect staff to use tools and resources to serve language assistance needs. I see here, can I post it again in the chat? Yes, I will do that right now. Here you go. Cecilia and anybody else who was not able to download it, I just put it in the chat box again. And we're looking at page 4 now to fill out this point of contact worksheet. And this is a place where I think your feedback really would be really helpful for the group, because I think a lot of points of contact tend to be the same, right? Does your city have a crisis line? Does your city have In my case, in the case of my city, we have a line called 311, which is just kind of like a general, you can call to report power outages, you can call to report issues, etc. If there's anything like that. So I see here two people don't see it in the chat. I'm seeing it on my end. Is everybody else seeing it, the document?
Mary Jane, you send it to me only, so you need to put it to
Oh,
everyone.
I had it set to you only. I see. Okay, great. Thank you. There you go. All right, everyone should have it now. So what are some of your points of contact? And does everybody understand what a point of contact is?
Mary Jane, can you just explain quickly the point of contact?
Sure, yeah. So I'm seeing here, Bertha, were you able to access it? Okay, I'm gonna put it in here one more time. And
Mary Jane, I can see it, and I'm going to try downloading it and then resharing it. So if you want to go ahead and keep going, but I'm going to work on that kind of behind the scenes here, and I'll let you know when it's done.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Anthony. Yeah, so a point of contact is basically, it's one of these language accessy kind of definitions that you'll hear come up a lot. It is essentially the ways that people who don't speak English interact directly with your organization. So if you look on page 4, you'll see here, one might be a crisis line or an emergency services line, or it might be that 311 kind of phone line I was describing. It could be social media, right? People are able to interact directly with you or reach out to you directly via social media. There could be, you know, like city council meetings, I think are a common way that people come to try to interact with government. For example, ongoing shelter services is listed at the bottom of page 4. And we're in the table on page 4, well, it's on pages 4 through 6, on the column to the left, point of contact. So ongoing shelter services, this could be ongoing city services that are provided, right? This could be the ongoing services that are provided by your organization if you're not government. And then community-based services, you know, so the ones listed here I think are great. Community events, support groups, written materials. I would love for you guys to share with the group other points of contact that you have identified or that you can identify while we're all together here today. I'm gonna.
Hi. Hi, I'm from the city of Tulsa.
Hi.
And one of the first things for us, it's when they first get in the door at City Hall, it's security. That's the first point of contact that people receive. So there was one instance when I was out there and most of our security is not bilingual and our primary language is Spanish. And there was a group of family members who wanted to get to the permit center and they were not able to, there was a language barrier. So thankfully I was there and I was able to guide them, but they were basically going to be turned away, which is not what we want, which is why we are, you know, wanting to get this language access policy out there so we can have training with our employees. But for us, the first people they see is security. And it's very important that we have something in place so everyone feels included. But yeah, it's the permit center, it's the 311 customer care line that you also mentioned, community events, resource fairs. That's how people communicate with us and have interaction with the city of Tulsa.
Great. I'm putting this in the chat box now. So that security checkpoint, that's a really good example of a point of contact, right? This is somewhere where an individual who is not fluent in English would have significant problems interacting with your services if they tried, right? And so does anybody else have any kind of outside of the box ones or ones that would be helpful to the rest of the group? And remember, we're thinking about this because these are the direct places where your policy is going to have to intersect with the people on the ground, right? These are the problems you're going to have to solve. And it's important to define those. I go back to that all the time, defining the problem, defining your goals, right? Points of contact are a really easy, sort of organized way to think about the problems. And also, I think if you think about it in terms of the way you would interact with a security officer, right? These are everyday points of contact that are familiar to us as well. And so we have some frame of reference for what's needed, right? And for how we would feel if we weren't able to understand and what we would need or want in those situations. So does anybody else have a point of contact to share?
I have one information. It may work for everybody or may not. For example, in some of the agency, there will be a front desk separately located in the office. So people, instead of going directly to the department, they come to the front desk, and the front
Reception
desk will
desks.
guide to the different departments where to
That's-
send it.
Yep, that's a great one. Reception desk, reception area. Anybody else? I just put some in the chat. Okay, so thinking through your points of contact and filling out this worksheet, I think is going to be really helpful. And also kind of thinking about what the expectations of the staff in those areas are, right? And this is kind of a ground up way to approach the problem rather than a top down approach. We've talked a lot about top down approaches where you look at who are the language access coordinators, who are the people in every department who are responsible for bringing your language access plan to life, right? That is really important. But under those people are the everyday users or the kind of, staff, city employees, organizational employees who are the ones who actually interact with the public, right? And there's usually a disconnect between people like us who are advocates for language access, the different language access coordinators and responsible people within every department, and then the people who report to them or the people who are responsible for actually delivering services to the public, right? And so defining from the bottom up what you think staff should do, right? Like oh, Annie, that's a great one, online chat function and the points of contact. Thank you for sharing that. In the great example of a security checkpoint, right? What are some expectations, right? And please share, say out loud, what do you think staff or security officers, in this case, should have to do if there's clearly a language barrier, right? I think one, they're going to have to identify whether or not there's a language barrier, right? And that's a whole process in and of itself. And then what else do you think a security officer at a checkpoint should need to do? And I would love to, Beam, your input is so very valuable, but I would love to hear from some people who have not shared yet.
Next one, they need to know the protocol of the that agency, what they have to do. There might be certain protocol they need to follow if the bilingual who do not understand English come to their door. They might guide to the bilingual staff or find the phone interpreter or in-person interpreter. There are several steps they probably need to follow, or if that doesn't exist, they might have to call to their supervisor to find out what to do next.
So yeah, they might have to contact an interpreter. They might have to contact their supervisor. I think have training, know what the guidelines are. This is the key, right? You guys need to have plans, right? You need to have policies and procedures. And we've been working a lot in this last year to talk about the different components of a language access plan. And we did a workshop about language access planning about 6 months ago also. And when this program ends, what I would love would be for you guys to have at least the bare bones of those instructions for the people on the ground, and then some way to hold supervisors accountable to making sure that those instructions get followed, right? So that's great. Expectations of staff, right? Identify the problem, identify the barrier, identify the language that needs to be spoken, right? They need to be provided training on how to be a sensitive and compassionate individual when it comes to dealing with person with disabilities and limited English proficiency, cultural literacy. That's very good, Manuel. I want to try to keep this now at the what should they do, not at the what should we teach them, because answering the question of what should they do will guide us about how to put those guidelines and training together, right? And so I hear this is why, I don't know if you guys were in the defining the problem workshop and the evaluation and assessment workshops that I did, where I really hammer in the idea of identifying achievable goals and identifying the problems, not in a broad way, but in a very specific way, right? Because when you answer the problems, or when you ask the questions in a very specific way, or when you identify the problems and get kind of granular, then you can say more than just they need to be provided training, but they need, for example, to have a laminated PDF of the OPI providers, phone number and PIN there at the security checkpoint, for example, right? And so if you identify that they need to identify the languages spoken as one of the expectations of the staff, then that's going to inform your training and what you teach them, because that's going to say to you, okay, well, then they need to have I speak cards or language ID charts or some of the various tools that we've learned about, right? And so I hate to be like super redundant over and over and over, but you know, identifying those expectations rather than what we need to do. And you're absolutely right. We need, you know, they do need training, right? But we have to figure out what they need to do first. And furthermore, we have to look at all of these points of contacts and kind of identify, you know, what all of those staff should be and will be expected to do, because then you can design a training that can broadly apply to all staff, right? And not just one training for your crisis line staff or one training for your security staff, right? Officer in this case should advocate to have a person within the company that is able to address language access questions or concerns as they come up. That's very good. So I think that's another big picture. I think I don't think it's realistic to have a language access person available on site, right, across like a whole city, for example. But I do think that it's really important for cities to have language access coordinators, and the language access coordinators ultimately can find ways to you know, make sure that the staff have what they need to fulfill their expectations at the time. And so I think, you know, maybe identifying the language that needs to be, or that there's a language barrier, identify the languages that need to be spoken, and then getting an interpreter on the phone or distributing translated materials. The ones that are in this worksheet are pretty good. Another one here is to notify the participant of the available language services. So you guys might remember that providing notice is actually written into Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, right? It's actually a requirement for federally funded entities, right? And so one of these steps, one of these expectations is going to be that either the staff have to notify in an effective way each person who comes through who appears to have limited English proficiency, or to have notice in the physical space, right? I think the more efficient way is to have notice in the physical space. And that's what a lot of agencies provide. That might be appropriate in situations like a security checkpoint, less appropriate, you know, in a health clinic where literacy might be a concern or something like that, and there's more vital information, right? So thinking through these expectations, and I hope that you guys are not just listening to me talk, but also kind of writing these in and filling these in. Cecilia, your hand is up. Yes.
I just wanted to clarify, no, not clarify, I guess add a comment that I think the practical tools training is so needed because they feed into the compassion, the impatience, you know, when we can't work with an individual because we don't have the practical tools, right, to have a genuine in a fruitful interaction, we tend to get more frustrated with ourselves and with them. And so that the level of compassion then decreases and the level of patience decreases. So I think they go hand in hand, the practical tools as well as the training for that compassion and that patience that we're talking about. So it's both, right? They can't live without the other because the practical tools is what makes the interaction easier and more compassionate and more patience for everyone involved in it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And there's a whole workshop on training and how crucial training is. And absolutely, you cannot have the conversation about language access without talking about training staff, right? But I think that where a lot of people get stuck is putting the chicken before the egg. And, you know, for the purpose of this small activity, we need to just identify what has to happen for people to be able to get services. So then we can go and teach them what to do and how to use the tools, right? And then the next part here, the third column, is the tools and the resources that are available, right? And so also training would absolutely have to be provided to teach them how to use these tools, right? But we have to identify what the tools are first. And so I would definitely encourage everybody. There are 2 workshops that I know of in this series going back for the last 18 months about training. Training staff members how to deliver services and training staff members about kind of the cultural humility piece. And that I think is all part of the process, obviously, and also should be written into your language access plan, right? So procedures for meaningful language access provision, if you look down on page 7, there's going to be some information about how to notify, how to provide notification, monitoring, and staff responsible for monitoring, right? There's going to be instructions in your language access plan for training. And in this worksheet, it's on page 10. And so if you guys want to skip ahead, we can do that now and go ahead down to page 10. The adapted from the Legal Assistance of Western Missouri plan and adapted from the MARC plan available sources at the bottom are actually quite good too. And I would still encourage you to complete the points of contact table on pages 4 to 6, right? Because that's really going to identify exactly, you know, what content needs to be in your training. And so, yeah, if you want to go ahead down to the bottom of page 10 to section 8, we can look at staff training. And I think that this is a great little just kind of template for, you know, some steps that can be taken, right? It's really simple, which I like. I think language access planning can be really overwhelming because there's so much that has to happen kind of in a non-linear way, right? Kind of like the way the COVID vaccine was developed. I remember reading that it's not that any steps were skipped, it's that rather than doing them in a linear fashion, one after another sequentially, they were folded into each other and done at the same time, right? And I think that when you're creating a language access plan, this chicken and egg thing comes up a lot, right? It's like, well, you have to train people. Okay, but what exactly do they need to learn so that you're not spinning your wheels and designing trainings that don't fit for everyone, right? You know, maybe you're identifying languages that have changed, and so you need a plan for how to continually make sure you know what languages are being spoken, right? So there's sort of a lot that has to happen at the same time. And what I really like about this particular guide is that it's super simple, right? There are 3 steps here. The first step is to distribute your language access plan, right? And this assumes that the plan is complete to all staff, right? And to have a current electronic copy available at all times so that staff will be knowledgeable of the policies and procedures, right? One staff person might be appointed to monitor the implementation of plans and conduct staff training as needing. And that goes kind of back to Manuel's point of you know, advocating to have somebody be kind of the coordinator for a lot of this, right? And I think you'll see more and more cities are starting to add budget lines to get language access coordination, which is great, right? But until that happens, we have to kind of build the plane while it's flying, so to speak. All staff providing technical assistance training or receiving inbound calls will receive annual LEP training, for example. The LEP plan information will be incorporated into the LEP handbook, right? LEP training will include information on the following topics, right? The legal obligation, the language access plan and procedures, responding to LEP individuals, getting interpreters, using and working with interpreters, translating procedures, documenting language requests, right? The documenting language requests goes into the data collection and evaluation piece that we talked about also in a previous workshop. I would also agree with Cecilia and Manuel that something about cultural competence and cultural humility should be included in there, in those steps, right? And so that's the whole point of this worksheet, is that you want to tailor it to your specific needs, right? And in terms of responding to LEP individuals, obtaining interpreters, using and working with interpreters, these are the things in the training they're going to call back straight to those expectations of the staff on the ground, right? And so what I want to do is actually put you guys in breakout rooms so that this is a little less me talking at you and a little more you guys working together to kind of answer some of these questions. Some of you might, you know, want to skip ahead. If you have done some work on the points of contact worksheet, that would be really helpful going into this. But why don't I go ahead? How many people do we have here? 1, 3, 4, 5. Wait, I can just look in participants. 18, 17. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and do 8 breakout rooms and have people basically, or maybe I'll do 5 and have people work in small groups. I would love to have you all fill out this point of contact worksheet together in these small groups. So I'm automatically assigning them now, and we'll spend about 7 or 8 minutes in these rooms. I'd like to, I'll bring you back in at 1:50. Okay, so you have about 8 minutes. Well, thanks everyone for doing that. And I was just telling Anthony that, you know, one of the reasons I like to use worksheets like this is that I think, you know, I teach at a very technical university, and we talk all the time about integrating information. That's the big hot topic right now in pedagogy. It's, you know, how can you take what you've learned and use it so that the information sticks in your brain, right? And we do a lot of me talking to you guys about stuff and sharing resources, and I think that's wonderful. But as we near the end of this program, right, we've got just 3 months left, well, 2 more after this. I want you to be able to take something with you, right? And I know it seems incredibly basic to go to the minutia of points of contact, expectations of staff, right? But it is really important to define those things so that you're not just making a really generic plan that doesn't have a really clear applied purpose, right? And that's what I see happening over and over and over with language access planning is very well-meaning advocates put hours and hours and hours of time and so much work and so many resources into creating language access plans, but they're very broad, right? They just say things like, and I'm not picking on you at all, Cecilia or Manuel, because you're absolutely right. Training 100% is needed. But that's a great example also that, a language access plan might just say staff needs to be trained, right? But without any real instructions for what should be included in the training or who should deliver the training or to which staff members, right? It's just going to sit usually in a Drive folder and not get used. Or what I see happening a lot is cities will put resources into doing big trainings that are attended by maybe 30 or 40 people, and then that's it. And then there's no tangible action that happens after that, right? And so even though this stuff is super annoying to do, integrating what needs to be done by, digging into the boring minutia of, the specific problems that should be solved by the language access plan is a really, really, really great place to start with something tangible. So we're going to work on this a little bit more next month. And I would love if those of you who plan to come back could spend some time with this document and kind of, as homework, look into it and really think about a lot of these questions. And not all of them are going to be a perfect fit for everybody, right? There's no one size fits all. But then we will go back and probably spend the next 2 sessions reviewing the previous content from this whole wonderful language access program that Welcoming America has put together, and kind of culminating it in this little document that you can kind of take with you. So I'm going to turn things over to Anthony. I have to actually jump just a few minutes early today because I have a 2 p.m. Training that I'm getting emails that I should be hopping into now. So thank you so much. And Anthony, take it away, and I will see you all next month.
Awesome. Thanks, Mary Jane. And yep, just a quick reminder, as Mary Jane said, we've got two more sessions already coming to a close here. Our next one, looking at the calendar, is going to be Wednesday, October 13th. So we'll send out a reminder the day before and an hour before, like we normally do there for that. Today's, as usual, again, being recorded. I'll get this posted to the member forum and let you know once that is there as well. Just a reminder to all of the other months of the series are in there as well, so you can access those at any time. So please feel free to do that. And then I think I shared this with some of you earlier, but I know we're coming up on Welcoming Week. I just threw this in the chat. If you're not aware of the virtual kickoff happening tomorrow evening at 6 Eastern time, I just put a link in there to the web page about that with how you can join via Facebook or YouTube. I hope you can. It's a really great program that we've put together to start Welcoming Week, and excited again to share and see what you all are doing as well. It's going to be a great week this year, and appreciate everyone's help with that. So thanks again, everyone, for joining today. Sorry we were running a little bit late there, but hopefully you got a lot from today's hour, and we'll see you next month. Have a good afternoon, everyone. Take care.